From the moment he was born, I thought the sun rose and set in my grandson's eyes. I held him in my arms the very first night he came into this world, his tiny fingers curling around mine like a promise. I whispered lullabies, kissed his forehead, and thought, this child will carry our family's love into the future. When he was small, every visit to my house was music. His laugh filled the hallways, his shoes scattered by the door, his drawings taped proudly to my refrigerator. He called me Nana in that sweet, broken toddler voice that could melt any sadness. I spoiled him, of course. Cookies baked warm from the oven, $1 slipped secretly into his pocket, bedtime stories told twice because he always begged, just one more, Nana. And I always said yes. I always said yes because isn't that what love is? As he grew, so did my pride. When he won a school award, I clapped louder than anyone. When he played basketball, I sat in the bleachers no matter how cold the gym was, cheering until my voice cracked. I bragged about him to strangers at the grocery store, showing off pictures like treasures. To me, he was not just my grandson. He was my joy, my light, the reason I believed my husband was still watching over us from heaven. I thought, no, I was certain that bond could never break. But love can be blind. I began to notice little things, a sigh when I told the same story twice, an eye roll when I asked for help with my heavy groceries, a quick yeah, when I reminded him to drive safe. Tiny cuts I pretended not to feel because I told myself, he's young, he doesn't mean it, he still loves me. Still, I carried hope the way a gardener carries water, pouring it over dry soil, waiting for seeds that might never grow. When family gathered on holidays, I sat at the head of the table, smiling at him across the dishes of food I had cooked with aching hands. He barely looked up from his phone. I laughed anyway, cracked jokes he didn't hear, and told myself, he's just distracted. He'll come around. My friends at church warned me gently. Teenagers can be cruel without realizing it. Don't take it to heart. But a grandmother's heart feels every word, every silence. We read love, or the absence of it, like scripture. And so I kept giving. Money slipped into his hand when he needed gas, a place to stay when he fought with his parents, warm meals, long talks, forgiveness after forgiveness. Because that's what grandmothers do. I thought my love would be enough to teach him respect, that patience would melt his sharp edges, that if I gave everything, he would give me kindness in return. But love is not always a shield, and one day my faith in him would be shattered in front of everyone. That day, I would see clearly the difference between being loved and being used. And it all began with the grandson I adored more than life itself. Before I tell you how everything changed, I want to ask you, if you believe respect matters more than money, support our channel by subscribing and liking this video. Because these stories deserve to be heard, and together we can remind the world of the lessons too many have forgotten. At first, the signs were so small that I told myself they didn't matter. Children grow bold, I thought. Teenagers are careless with their words. Surely he didn't mean it. Surely my sweet grandson, the boy who once held my hand crossing the street, still carried love for me in his heart. It began with laughter. Not the warm, bubbling laughter that once filled our kitchen, but a sharp laugh, mocking, almost cruel. He chuckled when I mispronounced the name of his favorite musician. He smirked when I asked how to use the television remote. "Come on, Grandma," he'd say, rolling his eyes. "It's not that hard." His words cut deeper than he realized, but I swallowed the pain. I reminded myself, he's young, he doesn't know better. Then came the little jokes in front of his friends. I remember one afternoon, a group of them sprawled across my living room. They looked at me with half-hidden smiles as he said, "Careful, guys, gon' trip over Grandma's ancient furniture. It belongs in a museum." They all laughed. I forced a smile, retreating quietly into the kitchen, carrying their laughter like a heavy tray I couldn't put down. It didn't stop there. Soon he began ignoring my advice, brushing me aside as though my years had taught me nothing. When I told him stories about his grandfather, he sighed, staring at his phone. Yeah, I've heard it before," he muttered. My words, once treasured, had become background noise. Each remark seemed harmless on its own, but together they painted a truth I didn't want to see. The respect between us was fading, and without respect, love begins to wither. I cried once, quietly, in my bedroom after he left, not because of the words themselves, but because of what they meant. He was beginning to see me not as his grandmother, but as an inconvenience. Still, I told myself it would pass, that he would grow out of it, that this was just a phase. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, and seeds once planted will always grow. That doubt would soon blossom into something darker when the laughter stopped being private and humiliation became public. And that was the day my world shifted into the cruelty of public shame.
It happened on a Saturday, the kind of day that once meant laughter and warm meals around the table. My daughter had organized a small gathering, nothing extravagant, just family and a few neighbors. I wore my best cardigan, the one my late husband had always said made my eyes brighter. I hoped it would hide the heaviness in my shoulders. The house buzzed with voices and footsteps, the clink of glasses, the rustle of coats being laid on chairs. I sat in the living room, Kane by my side, smiling as people drifted in and out with plates of food. And then, there he was, my grandson, the boy I once cradled, the one whose tiny hand used to wrap around my finger like I was his whole world. He towered now, taller than his father, confident in a way only the young can be. His friends trailed behind him, carrying the easy arrogance of youth. They laughed loudly, too loudly, as though the world was their stage. At first my heart lifted. I waved, waiting for his eyes to soften, to see me. But when he noticed me, his smile curled into something sharp. He leaned toward his friends and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "There's the old museum piece. Still breathing, huh?" They laughed. They actually laughed. My face burned, but I forced a smile, praying no one else had heard. Later, in the kitchen, I asked if he'd like more food. His answer cut like glass. "Careful, Grandma. Don't break a hip trying to play hostess." His friends chuckled again, shaking their heads like it was all harmless fun. But it wasn't harmless. It was humiliation dressed as humor. When I tried to join a conversation, he interrupted, rolling his eyes. "Don't bother her. She doesn't get it. She's from the dinosaur age." Laughter filled the room.
but my heart cracked, not because strangers mocked me, but because my own blood had turned me into a punchline. I excused myself, retreating to the bathroom. There in the mirror, I saw my own face flushed with shame. I pressed my hands to the sink, whispering to the reflection, "This is not the boy I raised cookies for. This is not the child I prayed for at night." Tears burned, but I wiped them away quickly, unwilling to let anyone see me broken. When I returned, he was still the center of attention, spinning jokes with my name at the edge of them. I sat silently, shrinking into my chair, invisible in a room I had once filled with warmth. And yet, amid the humiliation, something inside me shifted. His words hurt, but they also opened a door I had kept closed for too long, a door to strength, to the memory of the power I still held. Because while he mocked me as powerless, I remembered the papers tucked away in a drawer upstairs, the documents no one in that room seemed to value, but which held the future of everything they expected to inherit. He saw me as weak, but weakness was not the truth. And that night, as the echoes of his laughter rang in my ears, I decided if he wanted to treat me like nothing, then I would show him just how much nothing could take away. And so my silent tears became a seed of resolve, one that would bloom in secret, leading to the moment when I would hold my pen and write a new future. That night, when the house grew quiet and the laughter from earlier had long faded into memory, I sat alone in my chair. The room was dark except for the lamp on the table beside me. My hands rested on my lap, but they trembled, not from age, but from the weight of humiliation. I replayed the scene in my head again and again. His laughter, the faces of the family, some embarrassed, others pretending not to notice. The sting in my chest when my own grandson, the boy I had once cradled against my heart, mocked me as if I were nothing more than a foolish old woman. I wanted to tell myself it was just a joke, that perhaps I was too sensitive, too fragile these days. But the truth was sharper than denial. Respect had been shattered in that moment, and the pieces cut deep. I made tea the way I always did when my heart was heavy, but the cup remained untouched. My reflection in the kitchen window looked back at me, a tired woman with eyes swollen from tears she refused to shed in front of anyone else. For years I had been strong, carrying everyone, supporting, giving. Now, when all I needed was kindness, I was treated like a burden. The pain of that realization was heavier than any chore, any illness, any loss. But inside that pain, something began to stir, a small, steady fire. It whispered to me, "You are not powerless." Because what my grandson had forgotten, what they had all forgotten, was that this foolish old woman held more than memories. She held the future of the family in her hands. The inheritance, the will, the legacy my husband and I had built over decades of sacrifice. I dried my tears, my voice, when I finally spoke aloud to the empty room, was steady. You will learn, my dear boy, you will all learn that respect is worth more than money, and without it, money will vanish. That night, I went to bed no longer broken, but resolved. And in the days that followed, my silent tears turned into silent planning, because soon I would unlock the secret power they had all forgotten I still controlled. The morning after my silent vow, I walked into the study, a room few in the family even remembered existed. The air smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. On the highest shelf sat the worn leather folder my husband had entrusted to me before his passing. "Keep this safe," he had said. "One day it may be more than words on paper. It may be your voice when others stop listening." I pulled it down slowly, my fingers brushing over his handwriting etched on the cover. Inheritance documents. My heart tightened. For years, I had treated these papers as symbols, proof of our life's work, our sacrifice. Now they became something else. My weapon, my shield, my justice. Inside were deeds, accounts, and the will itself. Every line had been carefully prepared by our lawyer. My children knew of it, yes. My grandson had even boasted once, half joking, "One day all this will be mine." At the time, I had smiled, foolishly warmed by the thought that he cared. But now I saw his words differently. They weren't affection, they were entitlement. I sat at the desk, the lamp's glow casting sharp shadows across the papers. My tears from the night before were gone. In their place stood clarity. These documents were more than ink. They were the sum of my husband's sweat, my years of care, the sacrifices we made so our children and grandchildren could live without hunger or fear. And I was the guardian. I whispered to the empty room as though speaking to my late husband. "They humiliated me, love, but they have forgotten. We still hold the pen." Later that week, I scheduled an appointment with our old lawyer. I dressed with deliberate care, wearing the pearl brooch my husband had given me on our 40th anniversary. When I arrived, the lawyer greeted me with warm respect, as though I were still the woman who once stood tall beside her husband. He asked gently, "Are you certain about this?" I nodded. My voice did not tremble. "Yes." My grandson mocked me in front of the family. My children did nothing to defend me. They treat me as though I am already gone, but I am not gone, and they must understand that respect is the price of inheritance. Together we drafted changes, small adjustments at first, then bold strokes. Names shifted, percentages altered. A scholarship fund grew larger. A local charity appeared in the margins. My faithful neighbor's kindness was honored. And the grandson who humiliated me saw his name shrink until it disappeared entirely. With each pen stroke, I felt my spine straighten. This was not revenge. It was truth. A truth my family had ignored, that love cannot be faked and respect cannot be demanded after it's broken. When the documents were sealed once more, the lawyer pressed my hand. "One day they will see. Are you ready for that storm?" I met his eyes. "The storm has already come. This is my shelter." As I left his office, the city hummed with ordinary life, but I carried a secret thunder within me, one that would echo loud enough to shake the walls of my family's pride. And though I returned home alone, I no longer felt powerless, because in the quiet drawers of my study, beneath locks and seals, rested a truth waiting to explode. The revelation was coming, and when it did, they would never see me the same again. The family gathered that Sunday, unaware of the storm waiting at the table. They thought it would be another meal, another casual gathering where I would sit quietly, smiling through their chatter, invisible in plain sight. But this time, I was not the same woman they thought they knew. This time, I had something to show them. I laid a folder on the table, the kind my husband once used for business. Its weight was not in the paper, but in the truth it carried. The room quieted. Even my grandson, so quick with his mocking tongue, fell silent. I opened the folder and spread the pages one by one across the table. Their eyes moved over the words, confusion flashing first, then dawning horror. The will had been rewritten. The inheritance no longer flowed in the direction they assumed. Emma blinked hard, her lips trembling. Daniel leaned forward, his face pale. And my grandson? Oh, my grandson. His arrogance cracked into disbelief. "Grandmother, what is this?" he demanded, his voice louder than his courage. "This," I said calmly, "is what respect looks like. Or rather, what the lack of it costs." I told them about the nights I sat alone waiting for calls that never came, about the day I lay bruised on the kitchen floor, staring at the phone while their names glowed on the screen, none of them answering, about the humiliation, the neglect, the silence that screamed louder than any insult. Every word was a mirror, and they could not bear to look. You thought my love was endless, and it was. But love does not excuse cruelty. Blood does not erase betrayal. You humiliated me, treated me like a burden. And so, I chose differently. The inheritance will not reward disrespect. My grandson slammed his hand on the table. "You can't do this. I'm your family." I looked at him with all the strength my years had given me. Family is not proven by blood. It is proven by actions, and your actions have spoken louder than any words. Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that crushes arrogance and forces truth into the open. I gathered the papers back into the folder. This decision is final, and it will stand long after I am gone. No one dared to speak again. Their faces carried shock, anger, and shame, but beneath it all, a lesson they could never forget. And as I left the table, I felt no guilt, no regret, only power. But I wasn't finished yet. The lesson was only beginning, and soon I would make sure it stayed with them forever. The days after the revelation were quiet, too quiet. My children avoided calling, afraid of the truth I had set in stone. My grandson, once arrogant and loud, stayed away entirely. His absence was louder than his insults had ever been. At first, I thought the silence might sting, but instead, it felt like peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the doorbell, or the phone, or the empty promises of tomorrow. Then, one evening, Emma appeared at my door with flowers. She looked smaller somehow, her pride folded into her hands. Behind her, Daniel carried a bag of groceries. And finally, my grandson stood there too, his eyes darting, his voice low. "Grandma," he whispered, "I'm sorry." The apology was clumsy, but it was real. I let them in, but I didn't erase the past. I didn't forget the pain. Instead, I gave them what they had never given me: honesty. "You waited too long to remember who I am," I told them, my voice calm but firm. "Respect cannot be demanded at the last moment. It must be lived every day. Love is not about convenience, and family is more than blood. It is loyalty, kindness, presence. My grandson hung his head. Emma cried quietly. Daniel stared at the floor. And for once, I felt that they were listening, not to my words alone, but to the weight of their own choices. In that moment, I realized the inheritance wasn't just money or property. It was the lesson I had carved into their hearts, a lesson that no court, no lawyer, no fortune could undo. When they left that night, I stood at the door watching them disappear into the darkness. My house was still quiet, but not empty. I had filled it with something stronger than regret. I had filled it with dignity. I turned off the light, smiled at the framed photo of my husband, and whispered, "They will remember. Long after the money is gone, they will remember." And with that, I closed the door, carrying not sorrow, but triumph.